Alright everyone, Boba f***ing Butcher is back again with The Boys Season 3, Episodes 1 to 3, recap, review, and breakdown. Now, obviously, that's around like 3 hours worth of episodes, so this is going to be quite condensed. I just want to give my overall thoughts on The Boys Season 3. I've really enjoyed these 3 episodes from the very first 10 minutes. Things are very over the top in terms of, Termite and how he went very small and went somewhere. You know what I mean. But this is the charming yet chaotic, over the top, as we keep saying, thing about The Boys that we all love. I mean, it may not be for everyone, but hey, I'm here for it. So let's start off with episode 1. We start with the kind of campaign for Homelander, if you will, to somewhat distance himself from Stormfront, because everyone knows in the public about Stormfront, her affiliation, if you will, how far she goes back. So we have that movie trying to mend Homelander's image at the beginning, but this is a bit of an echoing storyline up until episode 3, obviously, with Homelander's numbers being down, but then kind of going a little bit the opposite with a certain thing that happens. But meanwhile, with the boys, they're still trying to take down Supes, albeit in a little bit of a more straight and narrow kind of way. Hughie is living his best life by trying to do it his own way and the right way, but that also flips on its head. But yeah, the termite thing, that was definitely unexpected. Personally, I found it hilarious. It is in true nature of the boys, and they definitely wanted to throw something at the screen rather explosive, if you know what I mean, in the very first 10 minutes of that first episode. And it was also just hilarious seeing Kimiko and Frenchie just getting decked across the walls by something you couldn't really even see. And in this moment as well, it kind of speaks larger for Billy and what's going on with him, because he wanted to kill Termite, as what he kind of does with Gunpowder a little bit later, but it shows how for the past year he's been trying to stay off those impulses from squishing the Supe there and then. But he said instead to call the Bureau, which is where we pick up with Hughie, who, as I said, is living his best life. Uptown Girl is playing. He goes to work at the Federal Bureau of Superhuman Affairs, but once again, this more or less gets flipped on its head a little bit later, showing initially how happy he is, going a complete contrast into just doing it the right way isn't really effective and doesn't work. And this is where those very seeds are planted with Congresswoman Victoria Neuman, of whom we already know is a Supe, but Hughie isn't quite in the loop yet. He gets a clue from that guy who turns out to be an old best friend of Nadia's, who is actually the real name of Vicky Neuman. And this definitely catches a bit of suspicions from Hughie's. Initially, he wrote it off as some crazy guy, but we all know where this goes a little bit later. We have Billy bringing Connect 4 to Grace Mallory, of whom is, watching over Ryan, Homelander's son, of which he brought through the Amazon Prime app at the beginning of the episode. A little bit of a plug there. And even Grace says to Billy how she's noticed and has heard that he's on the straight and narrow, no drinking, no killing Supes. But in other news, we have the Deep on his redemptive, I say redemptive in air quotes because he's more or less very much so publicly campaigning to turn his image around from that of what has happened in prior seasons. And this is where more or less Homelander's unwinding and unraveling across the episodes starts to begin. And that is because he noticed the Deep had a slot on the talk show way before him. And, again, just it really goes against his ego, the narcissism traits that he has. I mean, for crying out loud, just from the top of my head, with what Stormfront did to herself later on, it's like, why would she do that on my birthday? We all know Homelander, so the Deep, and how he walks over all the 7 members. Why does he have a slot over me? And he definitely, amongst everything we see Homelander do in all of the episodes that we got from 1 to 3, starts to walk over various members of the 7 as well, like the stuff that he subjects the Deep to in a couple of episodes' time. Basically threatens A-Train with heat vision, takes the piss out of him through his diet and what he's eating. It's just, yeah, he needs to feel in control and number 1. Now with episode 1, there's a bit of a theme with showing how everyone is trying to do things a little bit differently, such as Mother's Milk trying to leave the past behind him and celebrate his daughter's birthday, which heavily involves the superhero theme. He says he's over it. He's on the straight now. That is until the Soldier Boy stuff pops up, which is very woven into MM's backstory, if you will, and his family. We have Hughie, as we've already acknowledged, trying to do things the legitimate way through the government. And to be fair, there was some statistics, as Neuman said. Supe collateral damage is down, you know, deaths-wise. A perfect example being Mother's Milk and what happened to his family with Soldier Boy is down by 60%, or even as what Hughie suffered with his girlfriend in episode 1, with what happened with A-Train. Stuff like that is apparently down 60%. And as for Kimiko and Frenchie, well, Kimiko's only really there because Frenchie is still there. And I guess Frenchie is still there because, as was it Lil Nina, as she said, like before Butcher, she was kind of his boss, and he's always like a dog who heals. But, you know, there is obviously more to Frenchie and why he's still there, but I think he kind of likes being a soldier, so to speak, one, to take orders, and now Butcher is currently his main boss, you could say. But very interestingly for Stan Edgar, Giancarlo Esposito, I love this guy. He's forever playing that crafty role, and here he's trying to boast the compound V24, which is the Temp V, if you will, to Robert Singov, whom we can't forget is a part of the Department of Defense. He tries to say that it's the future. One dose of this temporary V gives a soldier 24 hours of power, and then they return back to normal. I do feel like there's going to be a little bit more to it, because with Billy's use later on, and I was going to mention this later on, but I do wonder if there's going to be side effects more than just, you know, kind of withdrawal effects, maybe addictive properties and stuff like that. As we had Ryan say to Billy a little bit later on as well, like, not only is your heart racing, which is, you know, some side effects, but your blood smells funny. So I do wonder if it's going to have some more severe consequences for people who use it, because it's still, I believe, in the experimental phases, but it's so expensive. It's $2 million a dose. So 24 hours of superpowers, cool, but 2 mil. So that will be 60 million per soldier and 600 mil per squad for a month's use if you want to use it in a military operation, which is insane. But we do see flashbacks later on, going back to Stan Edgar here, with how a younger version of him has been trying to somewhat militarize Supes for quite some time. Obviously, it went terribly awful with Payback, embarrassingly so, with like the friendly fire and the stuff that was happening and the flashbacks we're about to get to in episode 3. It's always been a part of what he's been trying to do. As he says here, he wants it to be a serious company, a defense and pharmaceutical company, not a daycare dealing with children. So he's kind of at his limits now, even testing Homelander at certain points. Of which could, to be honest, as a lot of fans are speculating, I believe, end up with what happened to Gustavo in Breaking Bad from Homelander. Yeah. We're gonna have to, you know, again, love to see your theories about what could happen to Stan Edgar here, because throughout these episodes with Starlight and stuff like that, he's really walking the line with Homelander, because he spoke to Homelander and Starlight summoned them to the same room and said, hey, you know, Starlight should be the co-captain of the Seven. Now, again, this is, like, really obvious. I keep wanting to bring it up and go on about it just because, like, I think it's one of the things I can't wait for most. It really is the kettle, you know, boiling. And how much more can Homelander take before he just can't take any more? And I know we got that outburst, which we're going to get to, but I'm talking about the real one. With Stan Edgar talking about your numbers are down to, like, what, double digits now? It's just ramping it up and up and up, and Homelander's face and lips are, like, literally just quivering. And he, again, kind of what we teased earlier, he takes a little bit of this frustration out on A-Train. Queen Maeve saw this, and that's what begins her text to Billy to start that conversation towards the end of this episode. This is where things are really ramping up to start that broader storyline this season of what is going on. Obviously, Starlight was completely and utterly apprehensive at first, if anything, scared of just even being offered it in terms of what will Homelander do to me just through being offered this. But she did see an opportunity about having a difference that could be made. Maybe even bringing some superheroes into the Seven that could help her. But as we get on in the episodes ahead, unfortunately for Starlight, it somewhat backfires, especially with the real Homelander that is coming out slowly over the episodes. Or what I think is just really a brief look at him, because obviously even the outburst doesn't showcase the real Homelander. But regardless, through being adored by some members of the public, that only emboldens him, and it seems that Starlight doesn't have as much power with this co-captain position as she thought she was going to get. In fact, like, it's kind of got her in a worse position, and she has to just kind of tide Homelander over until the boys can get closer and closer to this weapon, if you will, that could very well stop him. But more on that weapon in a minute, because I want to pick your brains about what you think with regards to all of that. In the meantime as well, we have some contestants trying out for the 7, one of them being Starlight's ex-boyfriend, Drummer Boy turned to Supersonic. I love how we get those little scenes of Hughie getting a bit intimidated by this, threatened, I don't know, but cozying up to Starlight in the meantime. Also, we have Homelander visit Stormfront. Now, this was, yeah, obviously I can't get into detail with scenes, just like the beginning scene of episode 1, and scenes like this, and scenes with the deep later because of demonetization, but like clearly it's like her only will to stay alive is to hopefully further her agenda in terms of him leading some kind of army for a victory in starting that new master race. She's even listening to her supporters still rallying for Stormfront, like, you know, her on the TV, like it's the only thing keeping her going for now. But she clearly has such a broken will, especially when Homelander completely disregards and shuts down her dream of how it took 100 years, but they finally found him. But yeah, she's pretty devastated ultimately, and that leads to this broken will that she has. It's like, okay, well, if he's not going to be the person I thought he would be, and I'm in this state, yeah, she ends up doing what she ends up doing. Now, towards the end of episode 1, this is where the Soldier Boy storyline really starts to begin in the season, with Maeve going to Billy. We also learn that she's the one who's been giving Billy leads on some soups, such as termite. She asked him what happened with that. Again, I feel like the trailers at this point gave away, I mean, it's not like they gave away tons and tons, but all of this we already knew the answers to, because Maeve was saying things like there must have been something that killed Soldier Boy because the nuclear meltdown was bullshit. But it's like, well, we know that he's not dead from the trailers. So the boys this whole time in episode 1, 2, and then 3, it's like they're trying to find this weapon, but I keep thinking the whole time there isn't really any weapon. It seems that he got taken, don't get me wrong, and put in some kind of Captain America rip-off storage kind of thing, but what weapon is there? I'm wondering if there even is still a weapon, and I would love your thoughts on this. Is there a weapon that incapacitated him and allowed him to be put in that kind of Captain America stasis? That could be something that's still relevant, stopping Homelander. But this whole time across episode 1, 2, and 3, obviously they know the whole death thing was BS. He was never buried beneath the site or anything like that. But I'm wondering if there still is even a weapon that can maybe just not necessarily kill Homelander, but take him out temporarily to maybe where they could put him in stasis. Maybe that's what they want to do, or maybe they resort to the weapon being Soldier Boy himself when he's released. But in this conversation, she gives him some of that temporary compound V24 in order to obviously go through the Payback team, because they're the only people who may know of what actually happened to Soldier Boy. And just as Billy begins to pour that down the sink, it turns out that we had some kind of random scene with Homelander coming to visit him. It was kind of like another bitching sesh about how even though they're both enemies, we have him explain how Vought and the Bureau are treating them like old playthings and trying to make them seem obsolete, and how that annoys them both. Bottom line, I think it is meant to speak to something larger of how they don't want things to, you know, stay the same or try and keep soups in line, doing it the right way and that way. It's not really the way they're both operating. So Homelander says in how perhaps they can both stir up a bit more of a mess. You know, what if it doesn't have to be that way? What if you and I, what if we share a different destiny? Something a little bit more scorched earth, shock and awe, blood and bone. I think this is also just only foreshadowing, you know, the shock and awe, blood and bone part of Homelander's future, but also the foreshadowing of Billy getting right back to where he was. No longer really on the straight and narrow, but getting back to squashing soups, quite literally, as he does with Gunpowder in the next episode. But the very ending of episode 1 springboards Hughie into really starting his journey back to the boys, because he sees the guy, Tony, go after Victoria, but calling her Nadia again, and we have Hughie follow and basically see that Vicky has the ability to explode people. And it's kind of like her powers work on like the concentrated area, which is why when her eyes made contact with the hand, a part of the hand blew up, then a part of the jaw, just various different parts. It doesn't like explode the whole place at once, just little almost concentrated areas. But I felt a bit bad for this guy, obviously, because something was clearly going on at Red River, because he says, I want us to tell everyone now what happened at Red River. You have a platform now. But Neuman is clearly trying to sweep this all under the rug to maintain that anonymity and not be a Supe, so she can kind of get into Congress and, you know, maybe even control it from the inside out. And Tony is a threat there. Alright, so episode 2, breezing through this one, the big moments of this episode. Back to the end of episode 1, though, we do have Starlight reading out that Red River is a group home owned by a Vought subsidiary, and she guesses that is where Vicky grew up. Well, really, Nadia. We have later on Hughie going to visit that very home for Supe kids, if you will, and we had quite a few very interesting powered kids, which, can you imagine, like a kid that could teleport, one crawling up the wall like Spider-Man. I like how they had that lady in like a full leg cast as well, just showing how dangerous it must be caring for kids like that, because you can only imagine if you're a kid with Supe powers, you may do things that are a complete accident but could be lethal to other people, especially in like a tantrum. Hughie manages to get a USB in the computer and download some files that show a little bit of Nadia's disturbed kind of upbringing. Quite a few people died as a result, again, of kind of what we were just talking about, possibly her throwing a fit when she was a kid and then exploding their face. Figures out that Stanager is indeed basically her father, you could say, maybe like took her in. And at this point, this is where the wheels really get in motion for the boys getting back in gear. That is the straw that is breaking the camel's back for him. We then have Billy going to Mother's Milk, and the straw that breaks the camel's back for him is really a huge thing for his personal story, and that is Soldier Boy. And Billy kind of does it a little bit crafty through appealing to him and just kind of saying that this could close the book on Soldier Boy for once and for all, his dad, his family. But for now, we have Frenchie and Kimiko go after Crimson Countess, and this just ends in a very typical boys kind of way. They didn't really get any information out of her. It was funny even before this, seeing how into the singing that Kimiko was. But yeah, regardless, we have Crimson Countess just running out, and poor guy in the Homelander kind of costume, if you will, getting exploded. Now with A-Train this season, we have a bit of, I guess, kind of getting into a bit of his personal story with his brother, but also just some like really tone-deaf pitches for Vought that he tried to do, because obviously he can't really run anymore, because if he does, he has like a chance of having a heart attack. I do really wonder where things are going for A-Train's story at this rate, because if he can't use his powers, like where are they really going to go? Like, do you think his character's gonna last much longer? Meanwhile, this episode, we have Homelander continuously trying to make things more difficult for Starlight. This is, again, his growing confidence is just emboldening him to just push the line even further. And in this moment, he gets pissed off even more with Stan basically stepping up for Starlight even more. But before we get to that, of course, we have Billy going to that firearm convention and confronting Gunpowder. I thought this was a bit reckless of him, to be honest, because when you're facing a Supe who has the ability to fire a bullet and ricochet it off to the point of where it grazes your face, so that's almost a headshot, and then the next bullet goes in his leg, it's just like, well, that was pretty stupid, I'm not gonna lie. He wasn't souped up himself, and as Maeve even warned him in episode 1, he kind of had to be on the same level. Now, albeit that does happen a bit later on, you know, this could have very well just ended here and then for Billy Butcher. And it almost kind of did, because we had that conversation with Hughie, and where Billy says that maybe Hughie was right. It's almost like he was going to concede and start to, like, let things lie a little bit. But when Hughie says that Neuman is a Supe, and that he's basically Stanager's daughter, and this just more or less reinvigorates Billy into the Billy before even this past year. And that's more or less because Hughie was validating his method by saying that he thought he could fight Vought the right way. We can't, it's rigged. If we're going to take him down, we have to do whatever it takes. We have to do it your way. And that is when Billy gets souped up. He takes the compound V24, and he completely wrecks Gunpowder. He learns that Grace Mallory was the case officer that Payback was working with back then. Obviously, the heat vision was coming out in this moment. He sliced through him in the car. I really am looking forward to seeing where things go for Billy, but going back to my comments of earlier, I do feel like there's going to be some repercussions from taking compound V24. And lastly, of course, we do get that moment where Homelander speaks to the public, kind of losing his composure. But more or less, this moment serves to kind of, yes, he says a few things that give you a glimpse at his true personality, but he almost kind of turns it around and appeals to that audience, of which Ashley points out at the beginning of episode 3, he's up like 21 points and a 44% uptake with white males in the Rust Belt. So yeah, he gives some glimpses by saying, I'm better this, that, and the other, but then he kind of turns it round and puts the narrative out there saying he will not be shackled, he will not be muzzled, and he will no longer be controlled. So it's just showing you how it is resonating with a lot of people out there, despite Homelander is quite literally saying he's better than everyone else, like even the people watching. But again, it just goes back to, I think, a certain audience who also believe that they're better than a lot of other people, you know, with the whole political side of things, even going back to Stormfront supporters. So I think it's bolstering a lot of people up like that, which brings us to episode 3. This episode starts off with that performance from Starlight, and it basically foreshadows the end of the episode with this composure and act that she puts on, just like she did for her mother, with how her mother was trying to push her to be something more at the end of the episode. She's still trying to serve something more, you know, and that is to kind of somewhat distract Homelander, keep him from melting down by giving him what he wants at the end of the episode, but, you know, signified with that closed fist with how angry and annoyed she is in that moment. Now, this episode really got me excited for where things are going to go with Homelander, but also other parts as well, because this is where we really started getting proper introductions to Payback. More importantly, Soldier Boy, Jensen Ackles' Soldier Boy, only through flashbacks, granted, but considering that he's going to be here in present day, is this going to really wind up Homelander even more, considering a lot of people compare Homelander, or should I say Soldier Boy, to Homelander, but also just now Homelander being a bit more unshackled. He keeps saying that he's free, that he can do what he wants and nobody can stop him, and there's so many things that he's wanted to do this whole time, and now that the people like him for being himself, he can do that. Again, he can't quite, because the people don't really know what he's like, but he's at least kind of deluding himself into thinking, maybe if I let out a little bit more of me every now and again, people would just take it and like it. We have Hughie get his arm broken by Kimiko. I was thinking like you could still probably go to work with a broken arm, but I guess they do give you some initial time off because Neuman could be getting a bit sussy. Around about this time, we had a bit more development on the Frenchie storyline where he helped get one of his old friends out, but it turned to be the opposite at the end of the episode with what she was telling Frenchie. Apparently, she stole the drugs. By the way, this starts that storyline up on which Billy enlists Frenchie towards the end of the episode to contact her because she can help them go to Russia, and that's all to do with Soldier Boy. But before we get to that, of course, we need to talk about those Soldier Boy flashbacks, because as that's when the boys went to go see Grace Mallory, because they learned from Gunpowder that Grace Mallory was directly their case officer back in 84. And that's when they were gearing up for this major offensive, and when, you know, Payback was all brought into Operation Charlie. And it just really told this story of how Payback and superheroes in the military zone who aren't soldiers, as Grace pointed out back in the day, really shouldn't be there at all. Like, they were embarrassingly dangerous for this operation, such as we had Soldier Boy, you know, pointing an RPG that would have ended up blowing up a bunch of their munitions and stuff. We had frickin' Swatto giving away their position, which literally did actually happen eventually. We had Crimson Countess quite literally friendly fire blowing up their own people. Not to mention Gunpowder just going crazy with the turret. It was interesting seeing a mini Stan Edgar as well trying to sell Payback to her, saying that Vought had entered into a partnership with the US government in the global war against communism so that Payback would embed themselves in the fight alongside all of this. And again, it kind of all goes back to a trial run of superheroes in the military, which can still somewhat reflect upon that present day scene earlier with him trying to sell the Compound V-24 to the Department of Defense to make soldiers not superheroes, but supes. With the younger Grace Mallory as well, we got a little bit of an origin behind Black Noir, who originally wanted his mask off, as we saw in a conversation with Stan Edgar, but then after all of the explosions and battle, it showed that he was basically Harvey Dent's Two-Face, to the point of where he never wanted to take off his mask again. Although we have seen glimpses of this before, now we actually saw the moment where his face was completely, Two-Face. Now, this is when Crimson Countess did say to Grace Mallory that they killed Soldier Boy. The Russians, they had some kind of gun or weapon or something. We saw it. She indicated that he was being carried away, which is why Billy at the end of this episode likely wants to go to Russia. Now, this is where things kind of went sideways for Billy, because he blamed Grace for not telling him about a weapon that could have even prevented Becca dying, because by now Homelander could have already been dead if he knew there was a way to stop Homelander beforehand, and even took it out on Ryan later, which, you know, led to Ryan almost hulking out with his heat vision and saying he hates Billy. So again, I want to raise the question of the weapon. Is there even a weapon? Because we know that Soulja Boy's alive. Obviously, in episode, if you're watching this without having seen any of the trailers, you would be wondering about a weapon, but there could still be a weapon that even made Jensen Ackles' Soulja Boy incapacitated to even be taken away to the point of where he's been kept in stasis until present day, of where he'll probably be getting out in the next episode. Also, do you think that Ryan falling out with Billy, caused by Billy, will make him lean towards his dad more? I mean, he's aware of his dad, so I don't see why that would make him automatically just kind of turn out like his dad or go with his dad, but you have to think, where are they going to go with Ryan? And, you know, he clearly has a little bit of a temper as well when Billy was kind of disregarding him, so do you think that he'll be more impressionable if his dad now finds him, because I guess he no longer has Billy for the foreseeable future? In other news, we have Starlight really trying to turn Supersonic away from the Seven because he's going to be picked, and she tries to warn him of all of the danger that there is. But there's another plan that Homelander is cooking up, and that is bringing Nadeem into the Seven, but Starlight doesn't really want to have any of that, but once again, just showing how if this is only episode 3 with what Homelander's like, he is basically flexing and calling her bluff, just saying, you know, what, fine, show the Flight 34 recording. If I have lost everything and I have nothing to lose, then think what will happen with me. I'll just take out New York for fun, I'll take out the Pentagon, the White House, and the thing is, you can easily believe him. He's that on the edge of the line, of which, again, it's the most obvious desire for the boys. You just want things to go crazy with Homelander, but it does keep making me think, is that going to happen this season? Are we finally going to see him actually do something like that? And this is where really Starlight doesn't really have any power at all, and the only thing she can do now, even as co-captain, and despite what Stan Edgar said, is kind of keep Homelander distracted while the boys try and get onto a weapon that can stop him for once and for all. I mean, I know Starlight obviously isn't particularly happy about having to do that with that conversation with Hughie, saying that he went back to the boys and what they're going to try and do now, and she needs to buy them some time, which again goes back to that performance she did when she was a kid, and the performance I guess she was giving with Homelander at the end. She just had to go along with it, but I was wondering why she didn't take it to Stan Edgar anyway, saying like, look, I don't want Deep back in. But I guess the reason they gave is that his numbers are back up. But I would have liked to have seen a scene of Starlight still going to Stan, because clearly Stan shut down Homelander a couple of times, but maybe now it really is to the point of you don't want to piss Homelander off because he is having a meltdown, and maybe Stan's say-so of how Starlight does have some say-so herself will not be good enough this time. I would love to know what you think of that. Do you feel like she should have still said, hey, but you said I have final say? It worked earlier on in the episodes. But I guess the whole point is Homelander is like that much more confident now, especially when people liked him showing a glimpse of his true self. But with the way it ended, with Starlight being caught off guard that Homelander is now announcing that they're in love, that is interesting. I mean, she kissed him quite a few times, so she's definitely trying to sell it herself. She had her fist behind her back. I think things could get pretty dark, because we know how dark Homelander is, so I really hope that he doesn't try and make any advances towards her to maintain appearances or whatever he might make an excuse for. So I'm both looking forward to Homelander going off the deep end more so than he ever has done, but also worried about the other characters as well. I mean, Hughie's probably not going to be happy that she's going to have to play house with Homelander. It probably is obvious that Jensen Ackles' Soulja Boy is just going to be the weapon, but it's kind of like a lesser evil, you know, fighting the other evil of Homelander. And, you know, Soulja Boy really isn't that good in of himself. For now, my impression on Soulja Boy, I don't have like a proper one. Obviously, he's acting like an ass to Grace Mallory. We knew he wasn't going to be a good guy, but we've only seen him in Flashback, so I'm looking forward to seeing him in present day and seeing those clips from the trailers that we saw actually come into the episodes. With Supersonic now saying that he has Starlight's bag, I feel like we all know he's going to die. I don't know how, but if he's only staying in the Seven to help her, some people might say, oh, what if, you know, Hughie's being taken off the board and she really does like Supersonic, trying to look out for her whilst he's in the Seven. I don't know about that, but I just don't think it's going to end well for him, but maybe that's a bit too predictable. I wouldn't be surprised if we have Homelander kill Supersonic just to get to Starlight, because she still cares about him, obviously, and he seems like a nice guy, so I could imagine him just lasering him just for the sake of it. Now he feels like he can, as he keeps saying, truly do whatever he wants. But either way, guys, I think I'm going to end this one here, condensing all 3 episodes into one video and trying to keep it as short as I can. Was a bit more of a rambly recap, I know, but next week will be more, you know, theories and breaking down scene by scene what is going on. But I just wanted to get something up on the boys anyway in the first few episodes. Sorry it's a bit late. I would love to know your thoughts on the first 3 episodes overall. Personally, for me, like with my conclusion, I feel like they've set it up nicely. It's been decently paced with getting the boys back together after the year of everyone in different places, even Billy himself being a bit more on the straight and narrow. But now things kind of gone right back to the bottom in an effort to really destroy Homelander. You know, they're clocking on Soldier Boy. Billy's on Compound V24. You know, things are dangerous for Starlight. Homelander is emboldened and more confident than ever now with his true self, showing a little bit more and more every day to that of the public. So for me, I feel like season 3 has hit the ground running, especially with some very, very entertaining over-the-top scenes. I love it. Some people might hate it. They might find it a bit too weird, but for me, that is totally up my street. So let me know your thoughts. As always, like the video if you did enjoy it. Let me know if you want to see more of the boys anyway. I'd really appreciate your feedback there. Links, as always, are in the description down below. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you fellow the boys and soups in the next video. Goodbye.